Hi there, and welcome to this episode of Unbossers Toolbox, a show in which we dissect each episode one best practice, one tool, one system, one process, one methodology that can help you integrate an unbossed mindset and an unbossed way of working in your day-to-day operations. And the topic we'll discuss today is of utmost importance for anyone in any team, in any organization, because we are talking about decision making. How can we make our decisions better? How can we improve our decision-making processes? Now, when we think of decision-making in a classic organization, then we can identify three different ways that we come to a decision. The first one is the standard one. It's top-down autocratic decision-making, which means that the manager can decide by him or herself and impose the decision on the team or the organization. The second is consensus, which means that all the participants in the decision-making process have to agree before the decision can be taken and move forward. So in other words, it's a no-go to take a decision unless everyone agrees. And probably most of you already experienced this and already experienced that a team can fall into a consensus trap, which means that they strive for consensus but never achieve it. And therefore, the decision-making process gets stuck, slows down, impacts agility, and so on. And then the third one, the third typical way to get a decision in a classic organization, which is not often used, it's rather an exception, is democratic voting, which means that the majority decides. Now, what we also sometimes observe in a classic organization that is within one and the same decision-making process, these three different ways to come to a decision are kind of mixed together into a cocktail that really doesn't do the job very well. And I'll give you an example. It's a stereotypical example, hypothetical, but I'm sure you'll recognize it. So imagine you have a manager, and this manager, he or she has good intentions, and they want to open up the dialogue with their team on a certain topic. They want to make everybody feel heard and seen. They want to leverage the collective intelligence. They want to, all good intentions. And so they start a conversation in the team and people start sharing their opinions. And at a certain point in the conversations, the pressure arises to come to a consensus. People start to assume, probably due to a lack of clarity on the intent of the discussion and the process of the decision making and who is the final decision maker, probably because of unclarity in all these elements, people automatically assume that they need to get a consensus. And moreover, they obviously want the consensus decision to be as close to their opinion as possible. And so what happens when the conversation continues, it becomes discussion. People start becoming emotional. They start becoming defensive about their opinion. They repeat their arguments. They become quite harsh to one another. And all of a sudden, you have no longer a team, but some individuals stating what they think and no longer listening to each other. The manager who started this with good intentions is observing this. He or she has another meeting in 15 minutes. He says, this is not getting anywhere. He checks, or she checks, the manager checks, what is my opinion? What is the majority opinion here in the team? And at a certain point, they slam the table and they say, guys, why are we always so misaligned in the team? Can't we just get along for once? This is not getting anywhere. We don't have time for this. We need to move forward, take the decision, boom, and everybody leaves the meeting unhappy. And so therefore, what you have in this decision-making process, it kind of starts as an open discussion, then it's consensus, and then because consensus doesn't work, the manager tries to solve it with an autocratic decision. And so this mixture, this cocktail doesn't really do the job. If this story or parts of the story is something you recognize, then I have good news for you, because in the organizations of our fellow unbossers, we observe a fourth type of decision-making. And this decision-making process is called the advice process, and it truly works better. It's called the advice process or decision-making by consent. And the general philosophy behind this process is that we need to embrace the individuality of each member in the team, whilst, and this is critical, ensuring the well-functioning, the success, and the speed of the collective. And so it's really about bringing this individual and this collective perspective together. And that is what the advice process tries to do, aims to do, and it does so quite successfully, if I may say so. So in this video, I'm going to explain how the process works, why you should give it a go, and what the major pitfalls are that you can expect while doing so. But before I dive into that, I just want to remind everybody that you can download the full Unbossers Toolbox from our website, www.unbossers.com. It's super useful, super practical. We co-created it together with our premium customers, so it's super customer focused. It brings all the relevant tools and best practices to integrate an unbossed way of working in the workplace together in one place. We also added tons of open questions to facilitate dialogue. There's tons of inspirational stuff in there, so if you haven't checked it out yet, please do so and go to our website. Okay, so the advice process. Where did it all start? The guy that you see here, hi, this is this guy, that's Dennis Bakken. He was the CEO of AES Corporation until 2002. And AES Corporation is a global energy supplier and not the small one. At its peak, $8 billion in revenue, 50,000 employees, and a very decentralized business model. So they had people and teams and plants and units all over the place. And so Dennis wanted to achieve two things. On the one hand, he wanted to prevent HQ becoming the bottleneck for all the important decisions that should have been taken in other places in the organization. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, he was a firm believer that job fulfillment comes from the ability to be able to take your own decisions. So he wanted to enable all his employees to make their own decisions. And he implemented it successfully at AES. Later on, he also implemented it successfully at Imagine Schools, a venture that he also launched himself, and that is today the largest nonprofit charter school network in the US. So also a fantastic case. Moreover, in all the organizations that we admire for their unbossed way of working, the advice process is the standard decision-making process. There are nuances and differences between organizations in how they do it, but the main steps and the general philosophy is the same all over the place. Now, if you are interested in more than the advice process when it comes to decision making, we highly recommend the best-selling book of Dennis, which is called The Decision Maker, and which is available on all online bookstores. Okay. How does the process work? Well, it starts with everyone having the power and using their power to identify problems and opportunities in the workplace. So while people are doing their job, from the cleaning staff to the CEO, we want everybody to be as powerful as possible and keep their eyes open for problems and opportunities to improve the workplace and the organization. And if someone notices a problem and or an opportunity, they can take the initiative to tackle it. They take the responsibility to tackle the problem and initiative and opportunity. And so from the moment someone does that, they become the final decision maker on how to tackle the problem or opportunity. That's the first step. Now, the reason why they can become the final decision maker, why it's safe to make them the final decision maker from the moment that they want to take the responsibility to take an initiative to tackle this opportunity or problem, is because they have to go through a number of steps before they can actually make the decision and implement the actions. And so the second step, from the moment that they want to take the responsibility for a problem or an opportunity, is that even before they start thinking about solutions, even before they start crafting a proposal, they have to go and talk with different colleagues in the organization and gather information about the problem or opportunity that they've identified. So the second step is not really thinking about concrete solutions, but really identifying and getting a deep understanding of the problem and the opportunity that they've identified by gathering information from different perspectives in the organization. Once they've done that and they're still, and so the opportunity is not an illusion, it's actual an opportunity, and it's validated by different perspectives, and they get a deeper understanding on the problem, and they still want to take responsibility for tackling it, only then they start crafting a proposal. Once they have a proposal, they have to ask feedback to advisors. So how does this work in practice? Very simple. They organize a meeting, invite a number of advisors. These are either people who they have talents and expertise which are tightly linked to the initiative you want to take, or these are people that are affected by the decisions you are going to take. Imagine that you work in an HR department and you want to implement a new HR system. This system will impact the day-to-day workings of other people in other teams. So it's only logical that you invite a number of those people as your advisor before you actually take the decision to implement that HR system. It's just a hypothetical example to give you an idea. So you organize an advice meeting. So that's step number 3. And you ask feedback from your advisors. That advice meeting is not a discussion. You present your proposal. Advisors listen. Advisors can ask clarifying questions to make sure that they understand what you're presenting. Then each advisor, just very dry, gives their feedback. Feedback 1, feedback 2, feedback 3. That's it. You don't, the person who's presenting the proposal just listens, take notes. There's no discussion. He or she can ask clarifying questions to make sure that they really understand the feedback, and that's it. Okay. Also, for the advisors, nobody cares about your opinions, whether you agree or disagree, whether you think this is a priority. Nope, nobody cares. There is someone, your colleague, who identified it as a problem or an opportunity, and he or she wants to take responsibility to tackle it. And what your role as advisor is to help them improve their actions and proposals. So it's really, even if you disagree, you keep that to yourself. You try to empathize with what they try to do. And from that perspective, you give them feedback on how they can improve the actions that they want to take. And this is in the beginning. I'll come back to that, but in the beginning, this is really a learning process to take on the role of an advisor in such a way. Now, in the standard advice process of Dennis Backe, after this first advice round, the decision maker goes back to the drawing board. He or she decides which feedback to integrate and which feedback to put aside, and make the decision based on the feedback, implement the actions, and then step number 6, inform the advisors. However, an important step that many organizations include, especially for high impact decisions, is that they will organize step number 4, an additional advice round. And what's the difference between advice round number 1 and advice round number 2? Advice round number 1 is really intended to gather feedback to improve the proposal. In advice round number 2, the proposal is ready to go, and this is really a final check, not so much to improve the proposal, but to check, am I missing something? Am I going to create more damage than I'm solving with this proposal? And so the advisors take on a no unless rule. And this role, this means that they listen to the final proposal, and if they see that if they have a fundamental objection, if they see that this proposition is going to create more damage or more problems than it will solve, then they have to say, no, I can't agree, unless, and then they have to make their proposal to refine your proposal so that it can land, right? So it's two ways then. So no unless means that you as an advisor say, okay, I see potential damage in the future if we do this, unless, and I suggest this is how we refine the proposal so that we make sure the damage doesn't happen. So then it becomes the advisor's responsibility to help you refine your proposal so that the advisor himself or herself no longer has a fundamental objection. And then you make the decision, implement the actions, and inform everyone involved. So that's the process. I hope this is clear. Okay, so there are basically three important roles in this process. First and foremost, the person who identifies the problem and the opportunity and decides to take responsibility to tackle it. From the moment they take the decision to tackle the opportunity or the problem, they become the final decision maker on the how. So typically these are not the managers, because there are more workforce than there are managers. And if everybody keeps their eyes open and identifies problems, so typically it's more often than not a manager that will be the final decision maker. And in the process, they will ask advice to managers and their peers to help them improve the proposal and the decision. Okay. The second role is the advisor. As mentioned, they participate in the advice meetings, and their role is to help the decision maker improve the decision and the actions that they want to take. Typically, and especially the first 3 to 6 months, we advise to also always identify a facilitator. This is someone who is part of the advice, especially of the advice meetings, but also supports the entire process and gives advice to the decision maker and the advisors on how to conform to the rules of the process. And specifically in the advice meetings, they are there to make sure that everybody stays within the constraints of their role. So the presenter presents, the advisors give feedback, there's no discussions, only clarifying questions. So that's what the facilitator is really the guard of the process. Because opinions may vary, I will come back to that, how people will try to sabotage in the beginning the advice process. And the role of the facilitator is trying to prevent that and trying to keep the process in line. So these are the three roles, and they're equally important, obviously. A number of reasons why you should give this a go. Well, first and foremost, if you don't want to make the top, and the top can be anything, it can be the top management of a company, but if you're the manager or a team lead of a team, you are the top of the team. If you don't want to make yourself a bottleneck for important decisions, this is definitely a process you can give a go. Secondly, and super important post-COVID, post-pandemic, it cultivates human connection. So the process pushes people to ask for advice. And asking advice means, hey, I want to do this, but I can't do it alone. I need you. Can you please help me? And so it cultivates human connection at the workplace, super important. It also empowers people to make their own decisions, which results in more fulfillment. It's quite fast. It's not as fast as autocratic decision making, as one person taking all the decisions, but it is fast and it is consultative. So people are being consulted by their peers and by their managers in the process, which is also, and that's the following reason, it's on-the-job learning. So it promotes objective debate about problems and opportunities in the workplace, and people learn from each other what types of problems and opportunities they see, how people think. They learn more about the problems and opportunities of their colleagues, and they learn how to take qualitative decisions and how to take responsibility. So it's really on-the-job learning, best learning in the world. Then obviously it maximizes the flow of information and ideas. It also maximizes buy-in because you're involving more people in the process than when you're taking autocratic decision-making. So it cultivates a sense of belonging. It improves decision-making quality, that's for sure, because you're harvesting the collective intelligence, but it also encourages action. You know, it's not like consensus where people debate and debate and debate until there's a consensus. No, it's presentation, feedback, refinement of the proposal, again, presentation, feedback, refinement of the proposal, and action. And so the proposal doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be good enough for now and safe enough to try. So 9 reasons why you should definitely give this process a go. In terms of pitfalls, this is what you can expect. Some people will feel rushed toward judgment and or suboptimal decisions. And these are typically the people who previously were able to take decisions by themselves. So the managers and the leaders, they're used to taking fast decisions, maybe asking 1 or 2 persons their opinion, but then basically being driven by their own opinion and taking decisions. And now all of a sudden they have to go through this process. They have to invite more advisors. And sometimes in the beginning, they have some problems with it and they want to rush the process. On the other hand, the employees who were never able to take decisions themselves, all of a sudden are allowed to take the power and the responsibility, and they are sometimes scared to offend people. So what they will try to do in the advice process is trying to integrate the advice of every advisor, which is simply not possible because people give different pieces of advice. So, and they will try to please everyone. And that's more often than not the consequence of the fact when we see employees taking on this responsibility. Then thirdly, in the role of advisors, that's really a learning process. It's a learning process to not impose your opinion. Also myself, everyone I know, we have had to go through that process that it really doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree. You have to leave your ego at the door and just very neutrally and factually try to help the decision maker to come to a better proposal and decision. And whatever decision he takes, in whatever direction he or she goes, you shouldn't, it doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree. And even if you disagree, you should be able to commit to whatever decision they implement. Because when you are the decision maker and when you come with proposals, you also don't want everyone imposing their opinion on you. You want factual, neutral feedback that can help you take the decision, and you will be very grateful if people commit to your decision, even though when they disagree. So it's really a two-way gift that you give to each other. Sometimes if you do the second advice round and you apply the no unless for fundamental objections, especially on high impact decisions, this is sometimes abused. So people will come up with fundamental objections which aren't really fundamental objections, simply to try to stall and block the decision making. So you get it. There is a risk in the beginning to get stuck, and here's where the role of the facilitator is super important. Then number 5, advisors not being honest out of fear. So imagine that you integrate this decision-making process in your organization and you are the CEO and you follow the advice process. In the beginning, it's going to be very logical that your advisors, especially if they're employees not in your management team, but just employees in the front line, that they will have to learn to be honest in their feedback to you. And it's very human in the beginning that they will feel some kind of fear to be honest to the CEO or to the manager. On the other hand, sometimes people also are afraid to slow down the process. So they say, I don't want to give too much feedback. I don't want to slow down the process. And that's also, I would say, a good reflection of every advisor. You know, is the feedback that you are giving really, really valuable feedback? Is it worth sharing? Does it really improve the proposal? Or is it just you that needs to get rid of a certain feeling or emotion or an opinion. And then lastly, super important, lack of transparency. Obviously, if you want people to take the best possible decisions, they need to have access to all the information to take that decisions. And in some organizations, that there is sometimes a lack of transparency, and people can only take the decisions with the information that they have. So make sure that everyone has all the information they need to come to good conclusions and decisions. Voila, those are the main pitfalls you can expect. This was how to make better decisions. We are Unbossers, change makers for human organizations. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or any support needed in your organization, don't hesitate to contact us. We are available through our website, and everything we do for the love of people and business. Bye. See you next time.